Call to order of a work session of the Goodyear City Council, July 12, 2010. All items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. We have two council members that won't be with us this evening. Both are out of town. Councilmember Cavalier, however, will be here on telephone for the regular meeting. We have one item on this work session agenda, and that's the master site plan for the 1,000 acres of land owned by the city. And Brian Dolke is up.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I had to find the keyboard that was hiding under there, so I think we're good to go. Thank you. Over the next 25 minutes, we'll be talking about an item that will be on the consent agenda later for your consideration. But what this is, it's a City Center Master Plan update as listed on the work session agenda. So we're going to breeze through some of this, and certainly if you have any questions, please let me know. First, HDR was a master planning firm that we hired that actually completed what we call the 140-acre master plan back in 2007. And if you remember, the 40 acres was for the city center proper, and then the 100 acres is what we called the University Park, which included the two private universities. UIW and Franklin Pierce each had options for the 30 acres on that 100-acre University Park. It's important to note that this was created, the master plan was created before we went forward with the city center design phase, which I'll get into in just a second. For the public, and as a reminder, this is the area that we're talking about as it relates to the 140 acres. It's just north of Yuma, and it butts up against Estrella Parkway. You'll notice that the smaller quadrant is the 40-acre city center, with the 100-acre University Park just north. And if you note in there, the master plan actually shows two universities, UIW University Incarnate Word on the south and Franklin Pierce University on the north, with the city park actually on the western edge of the 100 acres. So that's what was actually done at that time back in 2007. Well, a little bit's changed since then. And some of the things just to point out is in 2007, we actually went nationally to recruit a development team, included a developer, contractor, architect, potentially finance. And we went out for that. As you're well aware, Langford and Associates out of San Diego area were selected for this. And then we came forward to council with both development agreements as well as option to lease agreements in 2008. Then, of course, we got into the design aspect of the 40 acres, really focused on that 40 acres. And during that time, we came up with the different design concepts for that, which, of course, have been in the public setting. We've brought those before council numerous times. Also in 2009, though, the leases were terminated with both the universities. And at that point, we started having discussions with Arizona State University to include Franklin Pierce and New Hampshire Institute of Art. But there was they really wanted to try and be on the 40 acres closest to City Hall, where you had the synergies, the activity levels that they wanted. And so those discussions were done. And this next slide was a concept plan. Important to point out that this was a concept plan brought before council. But when Arizona State University, Franklin Pierce, and also New Hampshire Institute of the Art came forward and said, please put that on the 40 acres, concept plan that was actually done by Langford and Associates moved those onto the 40 acres and displaced or moved over the Performing Arts Center as well as a Multigen facility. So that went up on the 100 acres. This was never formally adopted or approved by council, but it was a concept plan as we were working with Arizona State University. So back to the 100 acres, and I can certainly refer back to the drawing again if needed, but back to the 100 acres, the original master plan for the 100 acres had that university intent. Again, 60 of those were going to be used for the universities. And like I mentioned previously, the land leases were terminated. So it effectively is changing the dynamics of this 100 acres. So when we came before council, there was an interest on the part of council to go ahead and take a look at this 100 acres, knowing, and this was after we knew that we were not able to go forward with the city center project because of the drop in property tax valuations. So at that time, we were asked to go ahead and look at the 100 acres, knowing that it was not a budgeted item. So we've been working on that. And really, I think council's direction is how do you maximize the 40-acre city center with the 100 acres? Make the pedestrian flows better, the connectivities flow better, and really treat it as an entire land area. So that's what we've been doing. We've been working on that. Once again, there was not a budget associated with that, but we had I would call it a decision by the attorney, by legal, and then also by procurement, that we could sole source this with Langford and Associates. When I say sole source, actually let them come up with a master plan because of all the knowledge that they gained on working on that 40 acres. So as part of that, we then started working with Langford and said, good news is we have direction to replan the 100 acres. Bad news is we don't have any money in this year's budget. So in working through that, we were able to come up with some I would tell you a proposal from them that we're bringing forward later tonight on consent agenda. Now, the 100-acre master plan update, that will be done by Langford and Associates. They have some of their same team members. Carrier Johnson, that is also out of California and has been with them throughout this process. I'd also point out that Mr. Rob Langford and Mary Pampu are in the audience tonight and certainly available for any questions later. But they brought on, they were thinking about this and brought on a firm by the name of Chan Krieger, NBBJ. I'm going to give a little bit of information about them, but certainly if you need more, you can ask Mr. Langford. But we didn't know who NBBJ was and why Mr. Langford went out and asked them to be part of this team for the 100-acre master plan. So a little bit about MBBJ. They did the urban design plan for East 115th Street and Cedar Glen Station in Cleveland, Ohio. It still didn't mean a lot to me at the time, but what it was is it's a $700 million, 4 million square feet new development plan within University Circle, centered around 2 transit stations, but I think as importantly, or more importantly, Case Western Reserve University's there, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals of Cleveland, Cleveland Museum of Art, and the Cleveland Orchestra. Point being, where MBBJ brings, I think, adds to the team, certainly what Mr. Langford has offered up, is they work primarily with public, with education, and with institutions. So it's actually, we think, a good weave into the team. They also did Downtown Action Plan in Kent, Ohio, and that was really looked at downtown developments planned by Kent State University. So in other words, how do you integrate with the universities? The other thing they brought forward, and we may have to try and put this into the contract, is MBBJ's done several riverfront projects, so we have to figure out a way of getting a river going through our city center, I expect. But New Orleans, Trinity River in Dallas, Pittsburgh's riverfront, waterfront in D.C., et cetera. So point of those is they have a fair amount of experience in trying to master plan areas that are in both metro areas, but then also in open space areas. Stacy Langford Pennington is part of the same team, and with her, she is bringing in some urban planning experience as well. In the United Kingdom, for example, in Shenska, she provided a global, it was termed global best practices for designing sustainable cities and communities, including development of community concepts and guidelines. So that's the team that Chan Krieger MBBJ brings to this. The deliverables, what are we going to get for this work? And again, nothing that's budgeted right now. But it's an overall vision for the area, and we talk about the 140 acres here. They are going to provide 3 different plan alternatives as part of this. They will be coming back to council in work session later after you come back from break, because there needs to be that interface back and forth with council as they come up with some of the design concepts. There is a cost to this. The budget, they have a not to exceed $80,000 for this. Langford is proposing the deal points to be worked out later if in fact you give the authorization for city manager to execute a contract working with the city attorney. That is not to exceed $80,000. That is being fronted by Mr. Langford. In addition, Mr. Langford is proposing that he'll eat all the costs that they have with this project in terms of being out here tonight. So they look at their contribution to this of about $24,000–25,000. They will be the oversight team over these two contractors being the architects, designers. As I stated previously, we do not have budgeted funds in fiscal 10-11. What we have been able to at least agree in deal points, again, not under contract, to allow us to reimburse that over a 24-month period after completion of the project. Now, the project will take about 8 to 9 weeks to complete. Potentially starting the third week in August is when we're looking at kicking that off. Mr. Langford is asking for some interest consideration, nothing we think onerous. You're at a prime rate, which is 3.25% right now for the first year, and then if we end up going the full 24 months, we're up at around 5% interest.
We're talking about the $80,000 now?
$80,000 and the interest on the $80,000. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, they've already come up with a schedule as we've been working on that and looking at how this can all come together. It is, as I said earlier, a 2-month process, and we are looking at sometime in September to be back in front of council, September, October, to come up with design concepts. They'll have 3 alternatives. They will have a preferred alternative, but really the intent of this, as I stated, is look at the integration of both quadrants, the 40 and the 100. Council has talked about how do we link them with pedestrian linkages, traffic linkages. They're looking at having designs as far as what's underground parking. What is the streetscape, or the streetscape as it relates to the types of uses, be it retail or other types of uses? Certainly, Mr. Langford can talk to that. But it is a full integration. It's also going to look at how we can weave in other types of uses like universities. So once that's done, we're looking at, there will be some marketing. Mr. Langford's committed to marketing, working with his affiliated brokers, and there will be a coordination between economic development, also with his team as it relates to now having something to market. So we think it's a good time in this down economy to start that planning stages and get that behind us. And finally, where does this lead as it relates to council? Well, certainly input from council on the design concepts. But some of the things that may happen out of this, if you remember the design concepts when Arizona State University was interested in being here, it actually moved performing arts and the multi-gen over to the 100 acres. That may happen in this design process. It may look at how that 40-acre park better integrates with those types of uses as well. But it is, we think, going to change what's currently out there. And it really has to, because right now 2 30-acre parcels side by side for universities obviously doesn't work since those leases have been terminated. The other thing that will be up for policy consideration is, do we want to go back out once we have the plan in place, to go back out for a request for information for higher education? Certainly, when we went out the previous time, we did not have in place a design for City Center. We didn't even have land on the table, if you will, at that point. So having more, I guess, thought out plans as it relates to the integration may be a good time to go back out for RFI, which is certainly a consideration at council. The other is, as it relates to future budget considerations. At what point do we want to, I'll call it contribute toward bringing universities here, be it infrastructure, be it other types of agreements that we can put in place. So that's something that may be out there in the future. Certainly a little premature to talk about tonight, but those things could conceivably coming back before council. So with that, because I know we have just until 5:30 tonight, tried to give you a good brief overview of what it is we're trying to do. Take the 140 acres, better integrate it, and get it to a point where we think we may have a better chance of success, especially for the 100 acres. With that, be happy to answer any questions. Certainly call upon our development team that's here as well.
Thank you. Mr. Langford, would you like to say anything?
Rob Langford, first we really do appreciate the opportunity to work with you on this, because I think the ASU thing showed me a lot, and I think as we've thought further about that and about the kinds of private uses that are out there in the market that wouldn't necessarily maybe make a lot of sense on the 40 acres, but could make some sense on the 100 acres. Corporate users, for instance, that could either be aligned with educational facilities or not aligned, but that would need kind of larger floor plate facilities for their purposes. And you know, even though larger floor plates could work within the 40 acres, it probably could work better in the 100 acres. So our guys and talking about this seemed quite logical, that we should look at the whole 100 acres, intersperse the parks and open space with educational, corporate, and public uses in a creative way, such that we can continue to talk with universities and at the same time have something to market for maybe sooner rather than later corporate users that are more of the larger floor plate type of facilities. The 40 acres would continue to be the major density. That would be the kind of the central point of the city center, civic center. But I think this is a great compliment to it, and I applaud the city and Brian and John Fishback for asking us to work with them on it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Comments from council? Start over here.
I have a couple questions. How much have we spent since we started planning the city center and I guess planning, at least since the last city center committee that the vice mayor was ahead of? Do we
Brian,
know?
can you answer that?
Coming up with the design, over the last year, it's been about $4.3 million. What that yielded is construction drawings at about 82% for City Hall, excuse me. And that City Hall was the original City Hall, not the one where we revised the cost estimates to get it down to effectively $50 million. That does include library plans, construction drawings at about 94%. So we almost have complete construction drawings ready to go. All the design engineering is all part of that.
Did that include the specific area plan and the master plan?
What this did is it included the master plan was in place. No, it does not include that. It
That's
just
not the
includes
total,
really the
because-
Langford team's work on this to date,
Okay, so the city spent 4.3 million?
about 4.3 million.
Yeah,
Not including.
Well, I don't think he's saying it's counting the specific area plan and the master plan. You're
Yes,
just
it-
talking Lamford. And I think what she was asking from the very beginning, what have we expended?
Yes, HDR, and I'm not, I don't recall off the top of my head, that was community development that had worked on that contract, if you will. So I'm not exactly sure how much that was.
Do you think we could get those figures sometime?
we
I think
certainly
that would
can.
be helpful. Of the
We
two.
can get
I've
that.
forgotten. At one time I knew what the specific area plan expended, but I don't remember.
And then my other question is with the university, I thought we already said we were going to try to get a request for information and look at that.
You mean RFQ, RFP?
Is that what it's called, RFP?
RFI.
RFI
RFI?
information?
information, all right.
Are we doing that now, or?
We are, Council Member Lorton, we are not proceeding with an RFI for universities at this time. In discussions on that, we felt it was better to have something in place. While certainly the plan can be flexible to allow exactly where they would locate, not knowing which universities might even have an interest and getting input now, we think would be counterproductive at best. So we have a plan in place. Could it be flexible to then accommodate the universities that do want to be here? Otherwise, they could control the project, and we don't think that's in our best interest right now.
I have a question.
Go
ahead.
Mr. Souza.
Thank you. At what point in time do you think we'll be considering universities again?
Councilmember Souza, it's a good question. One, we do know that ASU still has an interest. They've stepped away at this point, so we know that they still have a continued interest. Franklin Pierce, the New Hampshire Institute of Art, have maintained they have an interest also. Little different scenario where they were wanting a city hall built, sharing the council chambers, et cetera, for part of their lecture hall. So that one will still remain out there as a possibility. What we don't know is any new ones that may be out there, especially given that we would bring potentially more to the table, land, full designs, those types of things.
If we begin these type of contacts again, or if we are contacted by universities, I hope that they have the understanding that the city expects them to participate in the cost of having them here. I'm talking about construction, okay, as well as other services that might be demanded by them being invited or inviting themselves to the city of Goodyear. The universities have been a good idea, but we just can't at this time afford them. And particularly with the position that ASU has taken, that they assume that they're assuming that we're going to assume total liability for them being here. And I have not bought into that, and I will not buy into that. Whether it's ASU or any other universities, they want to come here, they participate in the cost of building and putting their educational facility within the confines of the city of Goodyear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Dillon.
Yeah, quick question. I think you addressed it, but my only concern is if you go out for an RFI to see what's out there, and I realize you got ASU, and you have this master plan for the 100 acres and the 40 acres, without the input of maybe some potential colleges, will we be reinventing the wheel again by going back out and here you have a master plan and they say, well, it doesn't really work for us, I'd like this and this and this. I know you don't want them driving the process, but I don't know, from my thought process, it almost seems that you kind of want to design it for a tenant. And am I looking at that in the wrong way here?
Councilmember Pizzillo, actually, we have talked about that as well. It's so which one do you have in place first? One of the things that the design team, and we've already talked very briefly about this, is how do you design for the universities? And one concept is still have some kind of classroom space on the 40-acre city center, and then the other more future looking, if you will, a larger campus setup that would be on the 100 acres. But the point is there can be, we think, flexibility in the planning, similar to what we did with Arizona State University. They originally were going to be on the University Park, came over to the city center, 40 acres, but that did cause a displacement of some of the public facilities, specifically performing arts and the multigen. So yes, in answer, I mean, that's a long answer to your question, but yes, there could be some, there'd definitely be some kind of amendment to the plan, some tweaks certainly at that point where we get universities engaged. But at this point, we don't know if they want classroom space. We think that's probably what they'd want initially, but eventually could be more of a larger campus type of setup.
My biggest concern is whether the $80,000 would be throwaway money, or we got to spend another 40, or you kind of get my drift if they come in and they want X, because I always thought, following up on Council Member Loretano, was I thought we were going to look at an RFI to see if there's anything else. I know the economy is not the greatest in the world. I understand that, but but to see if there was anything else out there, looking at you know, the drawings or you know, maybe some potential universities coming in through there to fill that out. My biggest concern is we're going to have to spend more money when we get a specific college that says they would like this or that, and that's kind of where my head's coming from.
Councilmember Pizzilla, certainly understand that, and I don't know if Langford team wants to address that too, because it can be looked at certainly both ways. But just trying to scale it down to having it more specific is the intent this go-round, where we actually have plans in place.
Thank you, Brian. Councilman, I think, at least in my experience, giving universities or corporate users or something to chew on, I think has been quite successful for us in terms of getting their interest. And I think with the team we've put together and the precedents that they're going to be looking at for educational kind of campuses around the country and even beyond, I think we're going to come up with some very interesting ideas, and one of which might be that there are certain university functions that no matter what university it is, they can share certain facilities. They can share student unions. They can share performing art venues or you know, meeting rooms or those kinds of things. And a couple of the ideas we just talked about are showing ideas that would allow those kinds of cost sharing and facility sharing to occur with several different universities. And so anyway, I think it's important to get the creative juices flowing, and I believe it'll be the right thing to do. And it'll give us something to talk to corporate users about now, that not necessarily related to universities, but you know, the larger employers in your city, or that we'd like to have in your city, and it'll show them some ideas of site plans and relationships of how that works with the infrastructure. So I think it's a good marketing idea.
So,
Thank
so
you, Jim.
Well, you
just real quick, Mayor. So it's my understanding if you have something already designed, much better than not having something that doesn't fit, because we know we have now doesn't fit as far as if you go out for the RFI. So you're saying it's better to do that than not to have anything. Is that what I'm hearing?
That, as long as it's based on some, you know, some strong concepts, which I think you'll see. I do think that's a better way to go at it.
Vice Mayor Lord?
I know we're time constrained, so I'll hurry up here. You answered some of the questions already that I had, but there is one thing. I just recently read a study on city centers, and where they had anticipated so many people selling their homes in the suburbs and coming and living in the downtown city areas, city center areas. It's not happening. So there's a new revival, you can say. So I guess I'm concerned and would like more study done into that, because that also affects the other quadrants and what we required of the other quadrants to build. And I think we need to have, whatever we end up doing, we need to have them in on the conversation.
I absolutely agree.
Pardon me?
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's just really important, and also blend in with the regional shopping center, because at the beginning of the specific area plan, we that was not even in the vision at that time. And so I think we need to be realistic economically how we're going to make all this work. So those are some of the points that I'd like to see studied if in fact we do this.
Thank you.
I'll pass, Jim. Time.
Okay. All right. Seeing no further discussion, I'll adjourn the work session.